Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm OT First Lieutenant Britton, and today I'll be briefing you on air power in the future, and specifically talking about the question of whether the United States can remain the dominant air and space force in the future. Next slide. So the things I'll be covering during the briefing are some challenges that we're going to face in the future in order to be able to remain the dominant air and space force, the need for newer aircraft and newer equipment, force reduction, and remotely piloted aircraft. Next slide, please. So some of the challenges that we're going to be facing in the future are, obviously other nations, other countries are developing their air power, and they're improving their air power. So if we want to remain the dominant force, we're going to have to adjust to that. For example, Russia and China have developed new air defense systems, and Russia also, according to an article from Fox News, has developed a new generation fighter jet, which is pretty similar to the F-22. It's a 5th generation fighter jet, and it's pictured right there. It's called the Sukhoi T-50, and that's a pretty impressive plane. So we're going to have to be able to meet that kind of challenge as well. We also have the global war on terror still going on, which is draining a lot of our funding from our military. And we have nations like North Korea and Iran, which are becoming threats with their nuclear capabilities. Next slide, please. So in order for us to remain the dominant air and space force, one thing that we're definitely going to need is newer airplanes. The airplanes that we have in our fleet are pretty old. According to an article in USA Today, the average age of an airplane in our Air Force is 23.5 years. And the Air Force would like to bring that down to about 15 years for the average age. Some of the bombers and tankers are even much older than that. And one of the problems with having very old planes is that it costs a lot more to maintain them. According to an article in the Wall Street Journal, we're spending about $1.8 billion per year to maintain our tankers. And basically, if we had newer tankers, it would cost more money up front to purchase them, but we wouldn't have to spend as much money every year repeatedly to maintain them. The same article also talks about the fact that a B-1B Lancer, which is pictured there, it's a bomber, and they currently require about a little more than 48 hours of maintenance per flight hour. So for every mission they fly, just to keep them in the air for 1 hour, they have to be on the ground for over 48 hours being worked on. Obviously, in order to get this new aircraft, it's going to cost money. And one way that we can get money is to look at some force shaping. Next slide, please. Force shaping is never usually very popular among airmen, but it is happening where the Air Force is reducing the number of airmen and learning how to do more with less. Basically, according to an article from Stripes.com, each airman costs the Air Force over $100,000 a year, because you have to take into consideration that they're getting paid their salary and then all the benefits that come with their health care and everything like that. So they're expensive, and right now we have about 335,000 airmen, which is the lowest number that it's been in the history of the United States Air Force. So we're moving in the right track as far as learning how to do more with less and not need to have so many people. By taking the money that we could save from having force shaping, we can look into buying some new technology. Next slide. And remotely piloted aircraft are going to be the future. These are also called unmanned aircraft. They used to be called UAVs, now they call them RPAs. And they don't have a manned crew that flies on board the aircraft. They have people on the ground controlling it. These are going to be a lot cheaper and more efficient than a manned aircraft in most cases. They can fly for very long periods of time. Some of them can fly for up to 50 hours straight, where they're in the air for 50 hours. And even the more expensive, larger RPAs, which are now being fitted with weapon systems like missiles, even those really expensive ones only cost about a third of the price of an F-35. That's from an article in The Economist. And so that goes to show even very expensive weapons-capable ones are much cheaper than what a manned aircraft would be. And right now, the B-1B Lancer, for example, is being used in Afghanistan oftentimes for surveillance. Basically, when they're not actually on a bombing mission, they're flying up in the air, they've got a camera that's surveilling on the ground. And that's a waste of money because an RPA could be doing that same mission for much cheaper. It costs about $720,000 to fly one 12-hour mission for B-1B, which is obviously expensive, and it could be done a lot cheaper than using a bomber for a surveillance function. And a quote from The Economist said that in Iraq and Afghanistan, almost all big convoys are preceded by a scout drone. So that shows that they are also trying to use RPAs effectively. And the Air Force also recently created a separate career field for RPA pilots. For people that apply to the rated boards to come to OTS or whatever, there's now an additional career field which is specifically RPA pilot. So it goes to show that the Air Force understands the importance of that career field for the future. Next slide, please. So to summarize, I covered as far as whether the Air Force can remain the dominant air and space force. We talked about some challenges to that. We talked about the fact that we need newer aircraft and newer equipment in order to be able to stay dominant. The fact that we can save some money by doing force reduction, and then the fact that remotely piloted aircraft are going to be a great way for us to be the dominant air and space force. Next slide. These are my references that I used. Next slide, please. This concludes my briefing. Are there any questions?
Yes,